There was a prayer you were certain God should have answered. You remember where you were when you prayed it. Maybe it was in the car, hands gripping the steering wheel a little too tight. Maybe it was on the edge of your bed, phone glowing in your hand with a message you didn't know how to respond to. Maybe it was in a church service, music loud, hands raised all around you, and you whispered into the noise, "Please, God, do this, fix this, give me this. I can't imagine my life without it." You prayed with sincerity. You weren't playing games. You were not asking for something you thought was evil. You were asking for love to stay, for a door to open, for a job to come through, for a plan you had built your heart around to finally work. From your side, this prayer made perfect sense. You had the logic, you had the timeline, you had the reasons. If you do this, God, I'll be okay. I'll be stable. I'll be able to serve you better. Just say yes, just this once, please. You looked for signs, a verse that would confirm, a song lyric that would feel like an answer, a random message from a friend. You collected little moments that seemed to say, "See, God is going to do it." So you waited. You watched your notifications. You watched the mailbox. You watched the calendar. Days passed, weeks passed, sometimes years passed, and the thing you asked for did not arrive. The relationship did not turn around. The door did not open. The job did not call back. The plan slowly unraveled in front of your eyes. There was no dramatic no from heaven, just silence. From your side, it felt like your prayer failed, like your words went up and disappeared into a ceiling that refused to break. You wondered, was I not spiritual enough? Did I miss some step? Is there something wrong with me that makes God ignore me? You replayed your own faith like security footage. Did I doubt too much? Did I pray incorrectly? Did I offend God somewhere along the way? You tried again. You fasted this time. You cried harder. You prayed longer. You confessed every sin you could remember. Still, nothing changed. The thing you begged for slipped out of your hands while you were still mid-prayer. From your side, it looked like abandonment. From heaven's side, it was intervention. Because you were not just asking for a specific outcome. You were asking for an entire future that God could see more clearly than you ever will. He saw the relationship past the honeymoon stage. He saw the job after the first paycheck. He saw the opportunity after the excitement died down. He saw the version of you that would exist on the other side of that yes. You saw relief. He saw bondage. You saw stability. He saw a cage that would slowly shrink your soul. You saw answered prayer. He saw a slow drift away from the very intimacy with him you were praying from. So he did something you did not recognize as love. He let your prayer fail, not because your faith was weak, but because his wisdom was strong. Not because your desire meant nothing, but because your destiny meant more. You didn't know what you were really asking for. You thought you were asking for comfort, for safety, for a future. He knew you were also asking for consequences you would not be ready to carry. So he stepped in between your request and your reality. He stood in the gap and refused to hand you the thing that would quietly hand you over to heartache of a different kind. From your side, it looked like silence. From his side, it sounded like, "I hear you, I love you, and because I love you, I will not give you what you think you cannot live without when I know it will not let you live the way I created you to." You didn't hear those words then. All you heard was the echo of your own voice in an unchanged situation. You looked at other people's lives and thought, they prayed and got it. They asked and received. What's wrong with me? You didn't realize you were comparing yourself to prayers that were different, stories that were different, callings that were different. You didn't realize that sometimes the greatest evidence that heaven heard you is that heaven did not do what you demanded. Because somewhere, beneath your specific request, you had prayed deeper prayers. Protect me, lead me, don't let me ruin my life, keep me close to you no matter what. And God, being God, chose to answer the deeper thing, even when it meant saying no to the thing on the surface. So the prayer you wrote off as a failure may be one of the main reasons you are still here, still capable of hope, still able to hear him. You thought he ignored you. He thought, if you only knew what this unanswered request is saving you from. After that prayer seemed to fall flat, you didn't just move on. You did what any heart does when it feels unheard. You tried to fix it. You rewrote the request to make it easier, smaller, more reasonable. Okay, God, maybe not the whole thing. Just let them stay a little longer. Just let the door open halfway. Just let this opportunity linger until I'm ready for whatever comes with it. You bargained. If you do this, I'll be more faithful. I'll stop complaining. I'll finally change. You made promises you genuinely meant in the moment, hoping that if you adjusted yourself enough, heaven would adjust its answer. When nothing shifted, your heart slipped into a quiet panic. You started dissecting your own faith like a problem to be solved. You read more books about prayer. You listened to sermons on keys to breakthrough. You examined every word you spoke, every posture you held, every fast you attempted. You were not trying to manipulate God. You were trying to find the invisible lever that would finally pull your miracle down from the sky. Because in your mind, the situation was simple. If this request is good, and if I'm asking with sincerity, and if God is loving, then the only missing piece must be me. So you turned on yourself to protect his reputation. You decided it was safer to believe you were the problem than to live with the mystery of a God who could say no. You told yourself, my faith isn't strong enough. My past disqualifies me. I must not hear God the way others do. And underneath those sentences, a deeper wound formed. If God really cared, he wouldn't let me hurt like this for this long. You didn't always say it out loud, but you felt it. You felt it when you saw others testifying about answered prayers that sounded like yours. You felt it when people told you just have to believe more, as if belief were a machine you could crank harder. You felt it when well-meaning voices suggested that if you followed the right formula, you could force heaven's hand. No one told you that sometimes faith looks less like demanding and more like surrendering, less like insisting, do it this way, God, and more like whispering, protect me from what I can't see, even if that protection looks like not getting what I want. But you didn't know that yet. So you kept returning to the same request like a person knocking on a door long after the lights are off. You rephrased the prayer, you softened it, you intensified it. You tried praying it standing, praying it kneeling, praying it with worship music, praying it in total silence. You tried to be more grateful so you wouldn't sound entitled. You tried to confess more so you wouldn't sound hypocritical. And every time life answered back with the same stillness, you absorbed that silence as a verdict against you. The enemy is skilled at speaking in that quiet. He leaned in and whispered, see, you are forgettable. Your voice doesn't move heaven. God answers others, but not you. You are the exception to all those promises. You didn't recognize those words as lies at first. You let them settle like dust on your heart. You started praying smaller, safer. You asked for things that wouldn't hurt as much if they went unanswered. You lowered your expectations, not just of life, but of God. You praised him loudly in public, but held him at a distance in private, afraid to risk another big request. Underneath all of that, your original prayer still pulsed. Please, God, do this. Show me you heard me. What you didn't realize is that he was answering you in a different language. Every delay, every closed door, every coincidence that kept you from grabbing what you wanted, those were all his responses. They just didn't sound like yes. They sounded like the rearranging of circumstances, the sudden change of someone's heart, the unexpected redirection of your steps. You saw those changes as obstacles to your prayer. He saw them as walls around your life. You thought, if he really loved me, he would remove these barriers so I could get what I'm asking for. He thought, if you knew what waits on the other side, you would thank me for every barrier I leave in place. Because what feels like resistance is sometimes mercy in disguise. Mercy that refuses to let you attach your worth to a person who cannot hold it. Mercy that refuses to let you build your future on ground that is already cracking. Mercy that refuses to let you enshrine a dream that would have become your master. You wanted God to endorse your blueprint. He wanted to keep you from being buried under it. So when your prayer seemed to fail, He did not mock your efforts. He did not roll His eyes at your repeated attempts. He listened to every word. He counted every tear. And in the places where your request collided with His protection, He chose to protect. Not because He is distant, but because He is close enough to see the outcome you cannot see. Close enough to say, I would rather let you be confused by my no for a season than crushed by a yes that would have broken you for years. You thought your job was to repair the failed prayer. His job has always been to repair your life, even if it means leaving some of your most desperate requests unanswered in the way you imagined. There are moments you look back on now and quietly admit something you never would have confessed at the time. If God had given me what I was begging for, I would have been in trouble. You can see it more clearly from here, with distance, with a little more healing, with a little more truth about yourself and about the people you once wanted so badly. Think about the relationship you begged Him to save. You remember how tightly you held on to that prayer. Change them. Soften them. Make this work. Don't let this end. You weren't wrong to want love to last. You weren't foolish for wanting reconciliation. But underneath that longing was another reality you didn't want to look at. They weren't safe for your heart. They were hot and cold, present and then gone, tender one day, sharp the next. You cried yourself to sleep more nights than you can count, then woke up and prayed, please don't let them leave, please don't let this fall apart. A breeze, from your side, the greatest disaster you could imagine was losing them. From heaven's side, the disaster would have been keeping them at the center of your world. If God had snapped His fingers and fixed everything the way you pictured, what would you have learned? That you only have to cling harder to keep someone. That your tears are a currency you can spend to maintain peace. That your worth is negotiable as long as the relationship survives. You would have thanked Him for restoring something that was quietly eroding you. You would have stood in church, hand over your heart, testifying about a miracle, while your soul slowly shrank to fit the small space you were allowed to occupy. So He let it end. He let the unanswered prayer become your path out of a story that would have cost you your voice, your boundaries, your sense of self. Years later, you still feel some of the ache. You still have memories that sting unexpectedly. But you can also say with shaky honesty, if that had continued, I would not be the person I am now. I would have lost too much pretending everything was fine. Or remember the job you were convinced was your one shot. You had already decorated the office in your imagination. You had already calculated how that salary would fix everything. You told God, if you open this door, I'll be generous. I'll be less stressed. I'll finally prove I can do something with my life. You prayed over the application. You prayed over the interview. You prayed over the waiting. When the rejection came, it felt like a punch. You checked your email 3 times just to make sure you had read it correctly. Thank you for your interest. We have decided to move forward with another candidate. You felt small, embarrassed, angry. You told yourself, I wasn't good enough. I blew it. I will never get another chance like this. You didn't know what the culture of that place really looked like on the inside. You didn't know how many people dragged themselves home at night from that same office feeling hollow and depleted. You didn't know that behind the shiny description was a machine that would have devoured your time, your health, your relationships, your peace. You wouldn't have recognized it as devouring at first. You would have called it proving yourself. You would have called it finally being responsible. You would have called it answer to prayer. And little by little you would have drifted from rest, drifted from real connection, drifted from the sensitivity to God's voice that comes when your soul has room to breathe. So He let them choose someone else. He allowed you to feel the sting of no in order to save you from the slow bleed of yes. At the time you only saw the closed door. You didn't see the burnout waiting behind it. You didn't see the version of you who would have looked successful on the outside and deeply empty on the inside. There are countless other examples. The move to a new city that would have stranded you in isolation when you most needed community. The friend group you wanted so badly to fit into that would have normalized habits and values you now know would have taken you far from God. The platform you prayed for, long before your character was ready to hold the weight of being seen. Heaven heard every request. Heaven also saw every consequence. From here, you can begin to understand what you couldn't back then. Saying yes is not hard for God. He can open any door, move any heart, shift any circumstance in a breath. The harder choice is saying no to a child who is pleading, when he knows that granting the request would train your heart to trust the gift more than the giver. You asked for what made sense inside your limited view. He answered from an eternal view where your wholeness matters more than your moment. It doesn't erase the pain you felt in the waiting. It doesn't make the loss suddenly pleasant. But it does mean your unanswered prayer was not a sign that God abandoned you. It may have been one of the clearest signs that He refused to abandon His plans for you. And slowly, as you trace these stories, a realization begins to surface. The question is shifting from "why didn't you say yes?" to "how many times did your no keep me from a life I would have begged you to rescue me from later?" There was a point where the unanswered prayer stopped being just a disappointment and started to feel personal. You didn't tell many people that. You knew the right things to say. God knows best. His timing is perfect. I'm just trusting the Lord. You spoke those phrases because you had heard them your whole life, and part of you wanted them to be true. But deep inside, another sentence quietly formed. If this is what love looks like, why does it hurt so much? You watched other people talk about miracles. They prayed and the test results changed. They prayed and the person came back. They prayed and the door opened right at the last minute. You clapped, you smiled, you meant it. But in a hidden place, you also wondered, so what does it mean that my story didn't end like that? Did I not pray correctly? Did I not matter as much? Some people trying to help said things that cut deeper. Maybe you didn't have enough faith. Maybe there's hidden sin. Maybe you just have to declare it harder. They didn't know you were already replaying every failure you could remember, offering them up to God like receipts of why you might deserve this silence. They didn't know you were already exhausted from declaring and decreeing and reading every verse about asking and receiving until the words blurred. It's not that you stopped believing God could do it. You started to wonder if He wanted to. And that is a different kind of pain, because when you doubt His power, you think, maybe this situation is just too big. But when you doubt His heart, you think, maybe I'm just not worth the effort. You tried to push those thoughts away. You tried to drown them with more worship playlists, more sermons, more busy activity. Yet late at night, when the world was quiet and the room was dark, they came back. Why didn't you come through when I needed you the most? Why did you let this fall apart while I was on my knees asking you to hold it together? From your side, it looked like He stood by and watched. From heaven's side, He was holding boundaries you didn't recognize as mercy. Because there is a thin, painful line between what you wanted God to do and what you expected God to be. You weren't just asking Him to answer a prayer. You were asking Him to prove His love by doing it your way. You didn't mean to. You weren't trying to manipulate Him. You were scared. The request felt like oxygen. If He gave it, you could breathe. If He withheld it, you weren't sure how you would survive. So when it didn't happen, it felt like He had ripped the oxygen mask from your face. You whispered, even if only in your heart, I trusted you with this. I told everyone I believed. Now I have to live with the embarrassment of a prayer that failed and a God who didn't show up. You didn't see that He was, in fact, showing up. Just not as the God who signs any contract you slide across the table. He was showing up as the God who refuses to become your last fragile attachment to a dream that cannot bear the weight of your whole life. The no you heard was not a slammed door and a turn back. It was a wounded father pulling back his hand from something he knew would burn you if he placed it in your palm. He heard all the prayers spoken from your desperation, but he also heard the prayers you had forgotten you prayed. Lead me, teach me to love you first. Don't let anything take your place in my heart. Don't let me build my life on something that will crumble. Those prayers were not cancelled by your later requests. He didn't say, well, you asked for protection then, but you seem to want this more now, so I'll ignore what you really need. He held them all together. He looked at the child within you saying, please give me this, and at the deeper you saying, please don't let me wander too far from you, and he chose to side with the deeper you. You experienced that choice as abandonment. Heaven experienced it as faithfulness. Because God would rather let you wrestle with questions about why he didn't give you what you cried for than watch you drown in a life he never meant you to carry. A life you would have blamed him for later and begged him to deliver you from. This doesn't make the loss less real. It doesn't make the unanswered prayer less painful. God never asks you to pretend it doesn't hurt. He invites you to bring that sense of betrayal into the light, instead of letting it rot in the dark corners of your heart. To say to him, honestly, I feel like you let me down. I feel like you were silent when I screamed. I don't understand how this can be love. Not because your accusation is accurate, but because your heart is. He can work with that. He can meet you in the raw, unedited version of yourself. And in that place, he begins to gently turn your question. Not why did you betray me, but what would have happened if you had said yes when I demanded it. That is not a question of blame. It is a question of revelation. A doorway through which you begin to see little by little that some of the things you call betrayal were actually the hardest forms of protection. The ones that required God to let you be angry, let you feel disappointed, let you think he was silent, rather than break his own heart by giving you a yes that would have shattered yours. One of the hardest parts of your unanswered prayer was not just your own private pain, it was watching other people receive the yes you were begging for. They asked for healing, and got it. They asked for reconciliation, and their story turned into a beautiful restoration. They asked for that position, that open door, that opportunity, and the announcement came right on schedule. You smiled for them. You clapped. You said, praise God, that's amazing. And you meant it. You really did. But when you went home, closed the door and faced your own reality, something inside you whispered, so what does that make me? You heard them quote, ask and you shall receive. You heard them say, look what happens when you trust God. And somewhere beneath their celebration, your heart quietly translated, I must not have trusted enough. I must not have asked the right way. God must have favorites, and I'm not one of them. You tried to push it down. You told yourself, I shouldn't feel this way. This is jealousy. This is wrong. But the feelings didn't disappear just because you labeled them. You sat in rooms filled with testimonies and felt like the one person God had overlooked. You read the verses on prayer, whatever you ask in my name, believe and do not doubt. Everyone who asks receives. And you thought, everyone except me. You didn't say it out loud. You were afraid of how it would sound. But God heard the sentence under your breath. He saw how those verses began to feel like accusations instead of invitations. Not because his words are untrue, but because you were reading them through the lens of one story, yours, and one request he had not granted. You didn't see how different your situation really was from the ones you were comparing it to. You didn't see that sometimes what others were asking for aligned with God's protection for their lives, while what you were asking for clashed with his protection for yours. You saw patterns where there were none. They got the spouse, the child, the breakthrough, the ministry, the healing. You lumped all their prayers together as if they were the same as yours. But you don't know what they had to walk through before that moment. You don't know what other prayers of theirs were answered with a no that you never saw. You only saw the highlight reel of God's yes in their life. You never saw the nights they wept over their own unanswered cries. In your pain, you built an equation. Their yes plus my no, I'm less loved. Heaven never wrote that formula. From heaven's side, the equation is different. Every story, plus my wisdom, brass, answers uniquely timed, uniquely shaped, uniquely filtered through protection. The same God who said yes to them is the God who said no to you, not because his love changed from person to person, but because his view of what each heart needed was different. You are not the control group in some cruel experiment. You are not the one exception to God's goodness. You are a child with a specific story, specific wounds, specific calling. Your life cannot be copy-pasted onto someone else's and judged by their timeline. There are yeses he has given you that you've forgotten because they didn't come with fireworks. The breath in your lungs, the friendships that held you when you were close to breaking, the quiet shifts in your thinking that pulled you back from the edge of self-destruction, the moments he nudged you away from choices that would have had consequences far heavier than your current pain. Those were answers too. You didn't frame them as answered prayer because you never thought to ask for some of them. He just did them. So now, when you sit next to someone who got the miracle you begged for, you face a choice. You can let their story become a weapon you turn against yourself. See, God moves for them, not for me. Their testimony proves I'm the outcast. Or you can let their story remain what it was meant to be. Evidence that God is able, that God is near, that God is moving in ways you can't always predict. Their yes does not cancel the love in your no. Their healing does not erase his presence in your pain. Their breakthrough does not nullify his protection in your delay. It's okay to tell God how complicated this feels, to say, Lord, I'm happy for them, but it hurts to watch. It hurts to clap for their miracle while I sit with my mystery. Help me not to turn their blessing into proof that I'm forgotten. That is not jealousy, that is honesty. And honesty is where he meets you. From there, he can begin to untangle the lie that says your unanswered prayer means you are less loved than the ones who got the yes. He can remind you that love does not always look the same from story to story. Sometimes love looks like rescue. Sometimes love looks like restoration. Sometimes love looks like a door flung open at the last minute. And sometimes love looks like God standing firm between you and the thing you swear would make you whole and saying, I know this feels like I am withholding life from you, but from where I stand, I am guarding your life. You see one chapter, I see the whole book. If my no to this request is the only way to keep you alive to receive other yeses you can't imagine yet, then I will endure your misunderstanding for a season, rather than give you what will lead you away from me for years. Their yes is not a verdict against you. Your no is not a sentence over you. Both are being held by the same hands, hands that do not love one child more than another, hands that answer according to a wisdom that someday, on the other side of this story, you will finally see with clarity. Until then, you are allowed to feel the sting and still choose to believe that even in the unevenness, he has not stopped being good to you. There came a time, not all at once, but in pieces, when you started to see small hints that maybe you had not been ignored after all. It did not begin with a thunderous revelation. It began with details, a sentence you overheard about the person you once begged God for, a story you stumbled across about the company that rejected you, a quiet confession from someone who walked the path you once envied and told you, I wouldn't choose it again if I had known. You were scrolling or sitting at a table or listening half distracted when suddenly a piece of information dropped like a stone in your chest. You thought, wait, if things had gone the way I asked, that would have been me. The layoffs you heard about months after the job fell through, the scandal that surfaced around the place you once dreamed of working, the pattern of cruelty or unfaithfulness that emerged in the person you were convinced was your future. You felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that you had been spared, sorrow that you ever wanted it so desperately. For a moment, you saw your own story from a slightly higher vantage point. You imagined yourself in those scenes, fighting to keep your sanity in that toxic environment, shrinking under that person's anger, carrying responsibilities you were never meant to bear. And something in you whispered, if God had said yes, I would have called it a miracle. But it would have been the kind of miracle that slowly killed me. You began to notice other clues too. The way your heart has softened since that prayer went unanswered. The way your boundaries have strengthened. The way you now notice red flags you once would have excused away in the name of faith. The version of you that prayed that prayer did not have this clarity. They were doing their best with what they knew. They saw a small slice of reality and made a request from inside that slice. You are not mocking them now. You are honoring them. You are saying, I see why you asked for that, but I also see now why heaven did not agree. Because as time passed, you did not only learn more about what you wanted, you learned more about you. You discovered parts of your heart that were more fragile than you realized. You uncovered old wounds that drove you to cling where you should have released. You recognized how easily you could have turned a gift from God into a god of your own making. You saw how attached you had become to your own script, how certain you were that happiness lived inside one specific outcome. And when that outcome died, something else was revealed. You are still here. The loss did not annihilate you. You grieved, you wrestled, you questioned, you shuffled through days that felt empty and heavy. But at some point, you started breathing differently. You laughed again, not at first loudly, but quietly. You made new connections. You explored new interests you never would have had room for if God had kept the life you were trying to preserve. And in that slow, almost imperceptible rebuilding, you began to encounter another dimension of protection. Not just being saved from bad situations, but being saved from smaller versions of yourself. You realized you would have stayed small to fit that relationship. You would have stayed quiet to keep that job. You would have stayed spiritually numb to tolerate that environment. Heaven knew you were made for more than survival. So the prayer that failed became the doorway through which your real growth began. You started to pray differently, less like, give me exactly this, and more like, guard me from what I cannot see. If this is good for me, let it stand. If this is not, close it, even if I cry over it. You found yourself adding a sentence you once feared, not my will but yours, not as religious language but as self-protection in the truest sense, because you had seen what your will would have chosen if it had been given free rein, and you had also seen what God's will had quietly protected you from by refusing to cooperate. You began to notice that peace is also an answer. Not the initial peace of getting what you want, but the deeper peace that settles in months later when you realize you no longer wake up afraid of losing something you once begged God to let you keep. That freedom is a kind of salvation all its own. So now, when you remember that old prayer, you don't only feel anger or abandonment. You feel gratitude and grief sitting side by side. Grief for the version of you who held onto that request with trembling hands. Gratitude for the God who loved you enough to gently open those fingers when you could not. You still have questions. There are still situations you cannot see the good in yet. Not every unanswered prayer has shown its hidden mercy. But you have seen enough to suspect that God didn't answer is not always the truth. Sometimes the truer sentence is, God answered a deeper prayer I didn't know how to pray clearly yet. He answered by protecting me from the yes I would have regretted for the rest of my life. There was a time when prayer for you was mostly a way to get God to do what you believed he should do. You wouldn't have phrased it like that. You were sincere, you were reverent, you loved him. But beneath the language of faith was a quiet assumption. If I say it right, if I feel it deeply enough, if I prove how serious I am, God will move the way I expect. Prayer became a kind of equation. My need, my faith, my effort, the outcome I want. So when that equation didn't work, you didn't just feel disappointed, you felt destabilized. If prayer isn't a formula, then what is it? If I can't rely on my yes to create his yes, how do I pray without feeling powerless? You weren't trying to be manipulative. You were trying not to feel like life was random. So you clung to anything that made you feel a little more in control. You looked for secret keys, hidden principles. The one prayer strategy that would unlock heaven like a code. You tried praying louder, then more quietly, more simply, then more intensely. You tried to find the exact tone that might convince God to finally give in. What you didn't realize is that the failed prayer was slowly dismantling your illusion of control, not to leave you helpless, but to set you free. Because control is a terrible weight for a human heart to carry. When you believe it's your job to pray perfectly enough to engineer the right outcome, you start to live under a constant crushing pressure. Every delay feels like your fault. Every tragedy feels like your failure. Every no feels like proof that you didn't do faith correctly. That burden never belonged to you. So God began, through this unanswered request, to gently pry your fingers off the steering wheel. At first, it felt like chaos. If I'm not controlling this with prayer, am I just at the mercy of whatever happens? But prayer, in His design, was never meant to be a remote control. It was meant to be a relationship, not a tool to bend His will toward yours, but a place to let your will be softened toward His. Slowly, you began to notice a shift. You started coming to Him not just to present specific outcomes, but to expose what was happening in your heart. Instead of only saying, "Change this person," you began to say, "Show me who I become when I'm around them. Show me why I'm so afraid of losing them." Instead of only saying, "Open this door," you began to say, "If this door is not from you, give me the courage to walk away, even if it breaks my heart." Instead of only saying, "Fix this situation," you began to say, "Form me through this situation. Don't let this pain be wasted. Use it to make me more like you, even if the outcome does not look the way I want." Your prayers became less about getting God on your side and more about letting Him draw you to His. You stopped talking to Him like a distant landlord you were trying to persuade and started talking to Him like a father who already loves you, even when He says no. This didn't happen overnight. You still feel the pull to revert to old patterns. There are days when you catch yourself trying to bargain again. "God, if you do this, I'll do that." There are moments when fear surges and you scramble for the old formulas. But something in you has changed. You no longer believe that His love is proven by how closely He follows your script. You are learning to separate the mystery of His ways from the security of His heart. So your prayers have gained a different texture. They are more honest, less polished, less obsessed with outcomes, more concerned with nearness. You can say, "Lord, this is what I want with all my heart. You know it, you see it, I won't pretend. But if this is not your best, if this would harm me or someone else, if this would pull me away from you, then protect me from my own desire. Give me what I would ask for, if I could see what you see." That kind of prayer is not weak, it is brave. It lets go of the illusion that you are the only one who truly cares about your future. It trusts that God is not a reluctant giver you have to corner with perfect petitions, but a wise Father whose no and yes are both shaped by love. You may still wrestle. You may still have moments when the old ache rises up and you say, "Just this once. Could you please do it my way?" He is not offended by those moments. He meets you there, right in the tension between desire and surrender. And little by little, He is teaching you this. The goal of prayer is not to upgrade your ability to control outcomes. The goal of prayer is to deepen your ability to trust the one who holds the outcomes, to bring your whole self, your needs, your fears, your specific requests, and then entrust them to a God who has already saved your life by refusing to answer some of them. There is something else you are slowly beginning to see. God did not just deny your request and move on. He took your prayer apart, like someone opening a letter and reading every line, not just the sentence at the bottom that said, "Here is what I want." Because inside that prayer, there were other prayers, hidden ones, unspoken ones, prayers you didn't even realize you were praying. When you said, "Please let this person stay," you were also saying, "I don't want to be abandoned again. I don't want to feel worthless. I don't want to live through another goodbye that proves I'm not enough." When you said, "Please give me this job, this chance," you were also saying, "I'm tired of feeling like a failure. I'm tired of feeling behind. I just want to know that my life matters. When you said, please fix this exactly this way, you were also saying, I'm scared. I don't trust myself to survive another loss. Hold me together, somehow. He heard all of that. He did not just see a specific outcome written in bold ink. He saw the deeper cries scribbled between the lines. Don't leave me alone. Don't let me be worthless. Don't let my life be meaningless. Don't let this pain be for nothing. Those were the prayers he chose to answer first, not by giving you the exact shape you requested, but by going after the roots underneath. You asked for a person to stay and prove you were lovable. He answered by walking with you through their absence until you realized your worth did not shatter when they left. You asked for a position to prove you were capable. He answered by training you in small, unseen spaces until you began to understand that your value cannot be reduced to a title or a paycheck. You asked for a specific outcome to prove he was with you. He answered by staying with you when that outcome never came, by showing you that his presence does not hang on yes or no, but on promise. I will never leave you, nor forsake you. You thought your whole future hung on his agreement with one request. He knew your whole life hung on something deeper, you learning what it means to be loved even when he doesn't do what you think love should do. So he began working inside the unanswered prayer. He used the ache to pull you closer. He used the confusion to strip away illusions. He used the long nights to speak to places in you that had been numb for years. You wanted relief. He wanted restoration. You wanted proof. He wanted intimacy. You wanted one door to open. He wanted the doors inside your heart to unlock, the ones that had been barred by old trauma, old lies, old agreements you made with pain. You said, give me this so I can finally be okay. He said, you can be okay even without this, but to show you that, I may have to withhold what you are convinced is your only chance at peace. Not because he enjoys your tears, but because he knows how easily your heart turns gifts into gods and requests into lifelines. He heard you say, I can't live without this, and he answered not by proving you right, but by gently proving you wrong. You are, in fact, living without it, breathing, growing, changing. There are scars, yes. There are days when longing still punches you in the chest, but there is also a new kind of strength you did not have before, the strength to say, I wanted that more than anything. I didn't get it, and yet here I am, still held, still loved, still pursued by God. That realization is an answer to prayer, not the one you wrote in your journal, but the one you whispered years ago. Teach me to love you for who you are, not just for what you give. You forgot you prayed that. He didn't. So when your prayer failed, he did not throw it away. He took the whole thing into his hands and began sorting it. Some parts he said no to outright. Some parts he delayed. Some parts he began answering quietly underneath the surface. The parts about healing, about courage, about learning to live without clinging to people or outcomes as if they were oxygen. You see this now in how you relate differently. You are a little less desperate to be chosen at any cost, a little less willing to twist yourself into shapes to keep something that does not keep you. You are a little more careful about what you call blessing and a little quicker to ask, will this bring me closer to God or just closer to the life I think I need to feel okay? That caution did not come from glossy victories. It came from prayers that never materialized and a God who met you in the wreckage. So now when you pray, you can still ask boldly. You can still bring him your specific hopes. But somewhere in your spirit, another sentence has grown strong enough to stand beside them. Answer this in the way that truly keeps me alive, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, eternally. Hear the cries I don't have words for, not just the ones I know how to say. If my request ever conflicts with your protection over my life, let my request fail and let your protection win. That is what it means to trust that sometimes the prayer that failed was actually the prayer that saved you. Somewhere along the way, you realized that the deepest wound was not just what you didn't receive. It was the story you started telling yourself about what that unanswered prayer meant. You told yourself, God didn't answer because I wasn't enough. Or, He didn't answer because He doesn't really listen to me. Or, my prayers don't matter the way other people's do. Those sentences settled into your heart like cement. You didn't repeat them out loud in church. You wouldn't have written them on a page labeled theology, but they pulsed quietly under so much of your life. Under the way you softened your requests, afraid to ask for too much. Under the way you pulled back when others talked about miracles, smiling with your mouth but withdrawing your hope. Under the way you began to protect yourself from disappointment by lowering your expectations of God. It was easier to believe He would do little than to believe big and feel crushed again. You didn't see how that story was shaping your posture in everything, how you entered relationships already bracing for loss, because the God who was supposed to protect you had, in your mind, ignored your most urgent plea. How you approached new opportunities with a quiet dread, because what if this is just another setup for heartbreak He won't stop? How you came to prayer itself with a mixture of reverence and suspicion, as if you were approaching someone who might help, but might also stay quiet at the worst possible moment. If that is how you see Him, your heart will never truly rest. So He began to reach into that narrative and gently pull it apart, not by forcing you to forget what you went through, but by inviting you to reinterpret it with Him. He didn't say, stop feeling that way. He said, tell me the story the way you remember it. So you did. You told Him about the nights you cried, about the humiliation of hoping publicly and losing visibly, about the way you still flinch when someone says, God always comes through. You told Him how alone you felt in the middle of that no, how betrayed, how exposed. You expected correction. You met compassion, not the kind that minimizes, but the kind that stays. You sensed Him somehow, sitting with you inside those memories, not as the one who refused to show up, but as the one who sat on the floor beside you while you wondered why He didn't do the very thing He was saving you from. He began to show you little flashbacks through a different lens. That conversation where a friend said, I don't know why, but I feel like God is guarding you from something, even if it feels like loss right now. That strange peace that settled over you for no logical reason on the night you thought you would break apart. That moment months later when you saw a truth about the situation you had been blind to. Truth that would have devastated you if you had discovered it from the inside instead of from the outside. These were markers, not proof that the pain didn't matter, but proof that you were never abandoned in it. Slowly, your internal narration began to shift. From God failed me to God held a line I didn't understand. From my prayer didn't work to my prayer revealed parts of me He wanted to heal. From He ignored me to He answered something deeper than I knew how to ask. Healing for you has not meant pretending you never prayed that prayer or pretending you don't care that it was never answered the way you longed for. Healing has meant letting God back into that memory, letting Him stand not on the opposite side of your pain, but right in the middle of it, as the one who wept with you even as He refused to give you what would have wrecked you. There is a sacred kind of honesty that comes with this. You can say, Lord, I still don't love how this went. I still wish I hadn't had to hurt like that, but I'm choosing to trust your motives even when I cannot trace your methods. I am choosing to believe you were protecting me and not punishing me, even when my emotions tell a different story. That choice does not erase your humanity. You will still feel pangs. You will still have days when the old questions knock on the door. But instead of letting those questions build a wall between you and Him, you can now let them be openings. Here it is again, God, the part of me that wonders if you are safe. Here is the memory, here is the ache, here is the version of me still sitting in that old room, convinced you left. Meet me there, again. And as He does, again and again, your story slowly rewrites itself. Not the facts, but the meaning. The meaning shifts from I was not worth a yes to I was worth a very costly no. Undine, a no that allowed you to be angry at God for a season, rather than be enslaved to a life that would have hidden Him from you for years. A no that honored the deepest cries of your heart above the loudest cries of your fear. A no that did not change his love for you, but revealed it in a way you were not ready to recognize then. You may never stand on a stage and tell this story the way people tell stories about sudden miracles. It is quieter than that, slower than that. It is the story of a prayer that looked like it failed, and a God who stayed until you could see that the scar it left is actually the place where your trust in him became more real than all the yeses you thought you needed. One day, maybe not in a dramatic moment, but in a quiet hour you didn't expect, you will look back at that unanswered prayer and feel something different in your chest. Not just the old sting, not just the echo of why, something else, a kind of reverence. Because you will start to see how much of your life has grown out of the very ground where you thought nothing good could ever grow. You will remember who you were when you prayed it, the fear, the loneliness, the urgency, the way that one request felt like the single hinge on which your whole world turned. You will remember the way you cried, the way you begged, the way you tried every form of prayer you knew. And then you will look at who you are now. Not perfect, not finished, still healing, but different. You know things about your own heart you didn't know then. You can name lies you used to live under. You can recognize patterns you once called normal that you now see were quietly breaking you. You carry a tenderness toward God that is not built on getting everything you ask for. You carry a strength you did not think you could ever have, the strength of someone who has lived through a no they thought would destroy them and discovered that love did not leave. From your side back then, the story looked like this. I prayed. God did nothing. My prayer failed. From heaven's side, the story reads differently. You prayed. I listened. I protected you. I protected you from a yes that would have taken you farther from me. I protected you from a future you only saw in fragments. I protected you by letting you be angry with me for a time, rather than giving you what would have hardened you against me for a lifetime. There are still questions you will carry with you into the presence of God one day. There are losses that will never feel light on this side of eternity. Not every unanswered prayer will reveal its reasons now, but you have already seen enough to know this. Love has been moving in your life in ways that did not look like love at first glance. You can begin to live from that place. You can start to tell your story without erasing the pain, but also without casting God as the villain in it. You can say, I don't understand everything, but I am learning that the prayer I called a failure may be one of the main reasons I am still able to trust, to hope, to hear God at all. Because if he had given you everything you asked for, exactly when you asked, you would have learned to treat him like a tool. Instead, he has been teaching you to know him as a father who sometimes stands between you and your own desires and says, I will not let this have you. I will not let this define you. I will not let this request rewrite the story I am writing with your life. You are still invited to ask. You are still welcome to bring your specific hopes, your detailed dreams, your very human longings. He is not asking you to become numb. He is inviting you to bring those things with open hands, to say, here is what I want, God. You see it all. You know how deeply I feel this. But if this will damage me, if this will shrink my soul, if this will pull me away from you, then let this prayer fail. Let your protection be louder than my insistence. You will not always pray that perfectly. You will have days when you slip back into bargaining and fear. He knows, and he will keep doing what he has always done, hearing every word, reading every line between the lines, answering the deeper cries you don't know how to put into sentences, protecting you even when you interpret that protection as silence. One day, whether here or in eternity, you will fully see what he saw when he said no. Until then, you walk by a different kind of faith. Not the faith that says, God will always do what I expect, but the faith that says, even when he doesn't, he is still the safest place for my heart to be. If something in you needs to stay in this kind of atmosphere, where your questions are not shamed, where your delays are not mocked, where your failed prayers are seen through heaven's eyes, You are welcome to stay close. Stay close to this voice that keeps reminding you that you are not an exception to God's goodness. Stay close to words that reframe your story from the side of His mercy, not just from the side of your pain. Stay close to divine frequency, a place where even the prayers that never came true are gently reinterpreted as part of the protection that has been following you all along.